is leading the charge with 28 more states bringing Facebook's parent company Meta to court.
In today's opening statements, Russell Coleman and his peers claim that Meta intentionally avoided safeguards to protect kids on Facebook and Instagram. Wave News anchor Scott Reynolds sat down for an exclusive interview with the Attorney General this afternoon to talk about this huge case.
Well, Myra, Russell Coleman has a team in Oakland, and they presented their opening statements in a trial that's expected to last up to 8 weeks and could cost Meta a few $100 billion to more than $1 trillion. The states, including Kentucky, claim Meta deliberately designed their sites to lure in young people for long periods of time, knowing the sites were dangerous, but lying about those dangers to parents and children. Dangers of endless doom scrolling, algorithms that take kids to the darker side, and often pornography.
This technology has fundamentally altered our kids' mental health, harmed our kids' mental health. We're starting with Meta, with Facebook, but as you have reported, the Commonwealth of Kentucky is also, we're going after the addiction machine, which is TikTok. We're suing TikTok. We're going after Roblox, that program that is the predator's preferred playground.
Now, Coleman says his staff and the other states represented in that Oakland, California courtroom will introduce internal documents from inside Meta showing the company knew its algorithms had a negative impact on the mental health of kids, but that it did not put in safeguards. Coleman compares this lawsuit to that one against Big Tobacco in the 90s, which led to changes in the marketing to kids. And after Meta was just ordered to pay $537 million in a similar case in New Mexico, analysts say again this case could range from $200 million to up to $1.4 trillion if Meta loses. Meta, meanwhile, claiming in a statement that the states are chasing an outlandish payment, saying there's no proof anyone was misled. Meta claims the lawsuit is an effort to penalize the company for industry-wide challenges, such as age verification. Scott Reynolds.